A flush knee to the face from Gabriel Bonfim knocked Randy Brown out cold. When Brown eventually woke up, the referee had already stepped in, which sparked some controversy. There's been debate about whether it was an early stoppage, but I don't think so. Just look at him. Yes, he woke up and started to protest afterward, but the fight was already over. The referee made the right call. Brown was clearly unconscious, and we don't need to see someone get knocked out twice in the same fight just to prove it's done. Randy Brown was out cold before he even hit the canvas. You could see it in his face. That's the face of a man staring into another dimension. The back of his head bounced off the mat, and his body went limp. Bonfim moved in to finish with ground and pound, but Brown was in no position to defend himself. His left arm was down by his side, and he still looked dazed. He only started to cover up after the referee had already stepped between them. So not only was it a good stoppage, it was a perfect one. Referee Mark Smith did an excellent job, especially after the earlier incident with Marco Tulio, who took an unnecessary ground and pound shot when the fight should have already been stopped. As Paul Felder, one of the best commentators in my opinion, said, that one was a clear blunder. But Smith made sure not to repeat that mistake in the main event. He stopped this fight perfectly, saving Randy Brown from unnecessary damage. The initial impact was already brutal. There was no need for more punishment. A fighter shouldn't have to be beaten into oblivion or risk a coma before a stoppage. If the referee hadn't intervened, Bonfim would have landed more ground shots on an already unconscious opponent. It was an amazing win for Gabriel Bonfim, defeating a tough and skilled fighter like Randy Brown. You can clearly see how much Bonfim has improved since his upset loss to Nicholas Dolby. He's more composed, tactical, and patient, rather than the overly aggressive fighter he once was. You could even see that composure in the finishing sequence. Interestingly, there was an earlier exchange that looked almost identical, but Bonfim missed the knee that time. Randy Brown, being the longer fighter, kept extending his lead hand to maintain distance, maybe a bit too far forward for comfort. There had already been an eye poke earlier in the fight, because of course, it's not a proper UFC bout without one. Brown's entire style revolves around controlling range, and is very effective behind his jab. So, Bonfim had to find a way to close the distance and work inside Randy Brown's reach, and the pathway was pretty simple. He slid in behind a jab, closing the gap quickly. That sudden pressure seemed to fluster Brown, causing a bit of disarray, and he instinctively ducked inward. It was a familiar position for Bonfim. He secured a single collar tie, gained wrist control, and landed a knee straight to the face, knocking Brown out cold. A perfect finish. Rewinding to the first round, it was actually Randy who initiated the offense. He stepped forward behind the jab while Bonfim attempted to parry it, though the parry wasn't clean. The jab still connected partially, but Bonfim pulled away and fired a check left hook, a staple of his striking arsenal. That check hook has been a signature weapon throughout his career. However, since both punches missed and Brown continued to close the distance, he ducked into Bonfim and decided to brawl. They traded hooks in close quarters until Bonfim controlled the position again with a single collar tie and threw a knee that narrowly missed. From the follow-through, you could tell that if it had landed, it would have caused devastating damage and potentially ended the fight early. But the precision just wasn't there yet. Brown disengaged and reset to his usual, more comfortable range. Most of the fight, though, was defined by Bonfim's leg kicks, a singular attack he used relentlessly to chop down Brown's base, slow his movement, and disrupt his jab. While the technique itself lacked variety, Bonfim used it with impressive versatility. He threw it from neutral stance, as a counter, and even while moving backward. He didn't show the same variety as Randy Brown's kicks. Brown mixed in inside and outside leg kicks, along with side kicks to the knee, but variety doesn't always mean superiority. Efficiency is king, and Bonfim exemplified that with his simple yet effective leg kick. His use of it throughout the fight deserves praise. At first, he slammed them in neutral exchanges, and Brown only managed to defend a handful. Interestingly, before Bonfim even threw his first leg kick, just 2 seconds into the fight, Brown had already lifted his lead leg to check, clearly anticipating it. He knew what Bonfim's game plan was but still struggled to stop it. His main defense was that same lift check motion, which worked only a few times out of the many kicks Bonfim threw. It was reminiscent of when Jose Aldo provided the blueprint to counter calf kicks, showing fighters how to defend them properly. Brown also checked a few of the kicks, but even those didn't seem to bother Bonfim. In fact, the impact often looked worse for Brown, whose stance kept getting knocked out of position. The power behind Bonfim's kicks was tremendous, and checking them didn't seem like a sustainable option. Still, credit to Randy Brown for staying composed and never showing visible signs of pain. His poker face was strong even though the cumulative damage from those early kicks could easily have ended the fight on their own. Randy was still throwing punches, still attacking, and still trying to move at different angles as much as he could, but it was clear that his footwork had slowed down. If you look back at his fights with Jack Della Maddalena and Muslim Salikhov, he's usually a very mobile, elusive fighter. In this fight, though, he often found himself standing right in front of Bonfim, largely due to the accumulating leg damage. Whenever Randy decided to attack, the counter leg kicks from Bonfim were brutal. Because Randy had to step forward with his jab, his lead leg became more vulnerable, making it difficult to check a kick in that position. This made Bonfim's leg kick a natural and efficient counter to Brown's jab. For example, there's a moment where Randy lifts his knee to anticipate a leg kick. When none comes, he transitions that lifted leg into a step forward for his jab. Bonfim tries to parry the punch, though not entirely successfully. Randy follows with another jab that pushes Bonfim back. Normally, being on the back foot makes it harder to commit to a leg kick, but Bonfim's versatility shows here. He lands the kick perfectly. Randy does manage to slap him with a counter shot, so he got something back at least. However, Bonfim didn't always need to move backward to land the leg kick. When he successfully parried the jab, he could stay in position and fire off the kick immediately. In one sequence, Randy steps forward with his jab again, but this time it's cleanly parried. Bonfim holds his ground, slams in a powerful leg kick, and retracts it just in time to evade Randy's counter right hand. That kick landed higher, closer to the quad and hamstring, because of the way Randy stepped in. This shows how Bonfim wasn't just targeting one area. He mixed it up beautifully, attacking the calf, the outside of the knee, the thigh, the hamstring, and even occasionally the inside of Randy's rear leg. That last one is particularly tricky. It requires precise distance and angle management. Bonfim can't throw that from long range like his usual lead leg kick. To reach the rear leg, he has to close the distance on a taller, longer opponent, then angle himself slightly to the left to create the opening. And he pulled it off perfectly. What's impressive is how he set it up. Bonfim began with feints up top, first flashing the left hand, then extending the right as if to parry Randy's lead. The final feint was a left-hand swing disguised as a hook, which Randy reacted to defensively. While Randy's focus was drawn upward, Bonfim was subtly adjusting his footwork. The first two feints allowed him to step forward unnoticed, and that final swinging feint distracted Randy just long enough for Bonfim to shift slightly to his left, creating the ideal angle for the rear leg kick. Notice how Randy Brown wasn't really moving much at this point. That was quite impressive from Bonfim, considering Randy is a tall, long fighter whose distance management is a core part of his style. He's typically very comfortable fighting at range and likes to maintain that space throughout his bouts. But because of all the accumulated leg damage, it became much harder for him to fight effectively from the outside. At times, he was forced to close the distance and brawl with Bonfim instead of risking getting his legs kicked apart for the entire fight. By this point, Brown's jab was already neutralized. The fact that he didn't move away as Bonfim closed the distance shows just how effective those feints were at distracting him. Watch how close Bonfim gets when throwing that inside leg kick compared to their earlier exchanges. He slams the kick into the inside of Randy's rear leg, kicking it outward, then tries to capitalize on the off-balance stance with a left hook. Randy reacts quickly, though, pulling away and resetting to a more comfortable range. There were other moments where Bonfim perfectly intercepted Randy's footwork. When Brown tried to step left behind his jab, Bonfim not only parried the punch but also cut off the angle. Randy then tried to go to the body with jabs, but those, too, were countered by leg kicks until Bonfim eventually went high with a head kick, likely set up by all the prior leg damage. He clearly anticipated that it might land cleanly, and it nearly did, he just didn't have the perfect distance. After missing, Bonfim lowered his stance and circled out to his right, patiently waiting for Brown to come forward, essentially baiting him into the trap of a right high kick. As Randy stepped in, Bonfim rose up quickly and threw a feint with his straight right hand to distract him. The setup worked perfectly. You could see Randy open his lead hand to parry, leaving his guard slightly open for the head kick. Bonfim broke through, catching him in the face with his toes instead of the shin. The distance wasn't ideal, but the trap and execution were brilliant. If Randy had been just a little closer, that kick could have been fight-ending. Throughout the rest of the fight, Bonfim continued to parry and neutralize Randy's jab, one of the most important factors in his victory. Randy's entire game is built around distance management, and his jab is the foundation of that. It's probably his best weapon, fast, accurate, and perfect for setting up his power shots. But once that jab was shut down, the entire structure of his skill set began to crumble, making him far easier to deal with. Bonfim fought intelligently. He focused his defense on neutralizing the jab and built his offense around relentless leg kicks, systematically dismantling Randy's best weapon while crippling his movement. That approach made a knockout far more likely, and ultimately, it paid off perfectly. It was an amazing win for Gabriel Bonfim. He defeated a tough, high-level opponent in Randy Brown, someone who, if the UFC extended its rankings to the top 20, would probably be right there. Bonfim now deserves a step up in competition. He called out Colby Covington, but I doubt Colby takes that fight. A more realistic matchup would be Gilbert Burns. Burns is currently ranked number 11 and, unfortunately, seems to be in that stage of his career where veterans are being used as stepping stones for the next generation. It's just part of the sports cycle. If that fight happens, I'd favor Bonfim to win. Even if the UFC decides to pair him with someone like Jeff Neal, I think Bonfim comes out on top there too. He looks like a future top 10 fighter, composed, powerful, and constantly improving. He's now on a 4-fight win streak, one of the longest in the welterweight division, and his momentum doesn't seem to be slowing down anytime soon. Thanks for watching the breakdown. If you enjoyed the analysis, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and I'll see you all in the next one.